Well, good morning or afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are joining from. My name is Patrik Pavlacic. I'm the head of research at BONARD. The last 19 months or so has been a rough period indeed. Nevertheless, the size and scale of the struggle has been matched by the level of determination amongst industry stakeholders, be it providers, agencies, and associations. Sector associations in particular have played a pivotal role during this period and in the build-up to any market recovery. They helped shape the market reaction by liaising with the government, advocating on behalf of the industry, providing guidance and conveying strategic messaging to students and parents. We at BONARD worked with a number of destinations and studies that analyzed the impacts of the pandemic and identified feasible ways forward and actionable steps. We're committed to continue assisting stakeholders through the provision of reliable data and advisory. As we are witnessing the first signs of mobility recovery, the focus seems to be shifting from managing the impacts of the pandemic to developing proactive recruitment strategies and building student pipelines. This session will shed more light on destinations and associations' plans going forward, with a focus on the next 6 to 12 months. We're going to kick off this session by a brief industry presentation that will detail where we as an industry are, and then we will proceed to an interactive discussion with our expert panel. Let me now invite my colleague Ivana Slobodnikova, who's our senior research manager, as she will guide us through the most recent statistics and insight that we as a market research company gathered through conversation and the work with destinations, providers, and agencies. So Ivana, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Patrik. It's my pleasure to join you today and share those first few minutes of this panel by sharing some key data points and insight on the ELT market. Just for those who do not know BONARD, we are a market research company with almost 14 years of experience in the field of international education, where we actively advise destinations, associations, providers such as individual language schools or universities, for example. Diving deep right away to the global ELT market, we've seen in recent years the global ELT market has faced new trends and new developments. This has been influenced particularly by the COVID-19 pandemic, but we saw new trends even before then by emerging new non-traditional ELT destinations such as Malaysia or Philippines, or actually the rise of online English learning that has been here even before the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2019, approximately 1.4 million students traveled abroad to learn English in one of the 8 major ELT destinations, that be Canada, US, Ireland, UK, Malta, South Africa, Australia, or New Zealand. These students cumulatively produced 9.9 million student weeks. Since 2015, we've seen the market maturing as student numbers has been rather accumulating than increasing. At the same time, the average length of stay of these students has been slowly decreasing, thus causing a gradual decline in student weeks. In 2020, mobility was halted, and the ELT sector, the effects on it has been devastating. The global ELT data on English language travel shows that the overall decline in student numbers was by 70% compared to 2019. And by 56% in terms of student weeks when comparing 2019 and 2020 data. Even before COVID-19 pandemic, there was an overall decline in student weeks, and it was predominantly influenced by recent decreases in the US and the UK. In this time, Australia and New Zealand as markets remain fairly stable. At the same time, Canada showcased growth up until 2019, and likewise Ireland. This was predominantly driven by enhancing work rights for English language students, and thus it was driven by a higher demand coming from Latin countries, especially from Brazil. Now, the 2020 distortion very much varied across individual destinations. For destinations that are more traditional for adults, English language learning, and have longer average length of stay, the decline was smaller. However, at the same time, all of the 8 ELT destinations faced a double-digit decline. So for 2020, Australia dropped by 49% in student weeks when comparing 2019 and 2020, Canada by 49%, and then the US by 50%. Destinations which are catering more to juniors faced larger decreases. UK dropped by 71%, and Malta, for example, dropped by 79% compared to 2019. This was even more evident on the figures on student numbers, where UK faced a drop of 84% year on year, Malta by 80%, and Ireland by 79% on 2019. Looking at the individual source markets, this was predominantly driven by the fact that large European markets, who usually are big centers of junior students, faced a significant drop. For example, Italy faced 80% drop for all three above mentioned destinations in 2020. Now looking a little bit more in the granular data and specifically on individual source markets, such data are very important when preparing strategy on the way of recovery for the ELT sector. For all major, let's say the top 80 global ELT markets, all of source markets actually all faced double-digit decreases in 2020. Top source markets such as China and Brazil both faced more than half of the decrease of their volume. So China dropped by 50% in student weeks when comparing to 2019, and Brazil by 51%. One of the things that the 2020 data show is not only huge decreases due to pandemic, but also they show that some of the markets actually have been a little more resilient to the pandemic. And despite their double-digit declines, they were much smaller than traditional big markets such as China and Brazil. Especially a good example here is Colombia. It is a market that has been ranked as 7th biggest source market in 2015 and gradually bettered its position, and now it's ranked as the 3rd biggest source market for the ELT market. And it was done both in 2019 and 2020. So when we look at the data and compare 2019 and 2020, the drop was by 35%, which is considerably smaller than, for example, China and Brazil. At the same time, Colombia delivered in 2020 more than 340,000 student weeks globally. There are smaller markets that has been also resilient. For example, Nepal faced drop only, well, in terms of COVID year, only by 12% year on year. And then, for example, Venezuela dropped by 26% year on year. To complement the data that has been shown on the previous slide, I would also like to share a couple of trends that we have seen in the ELT market and it can play an important role on the road to recovery. So generally speaking, there is definitely a pent-up demand in the market and students are eager to travel. However, the return is going to be rather gradual than a sudden return to the student mobility. This is predominantly caused by uncertainty in source markets. We identified 3 factors that's going to be determining going to determine the pace of market recovery. This is going to be increased vaccination rate in source markets that we have seen in the recent months. Then it's vaccine recognition and regulation related to under 18 travel. A good example was actually coming out of the UK and the recent announcement. First of all, UK now accept World Health Organization emergency use listing procedures vaccines, which include vaccines such as Sinovac, Sinopharm, Beijing, or Covaxin, which are more present than in Asian market, especially in China. At the same time, UK government announced that all travelers, those who are under 18, are considered being fully vaccinated, and therefore they do not have to undergo a quarantine. There are also going to be secondary factors that are going to play into ELT recovery, and that's definitely students and parents' perception on the health and safety measures in the destination. Overall, it can be said that the outlook or the feeling out of 2020 is much more positive than it was in 2020. However, it's not nowhere close to what we experienced in 2019. This is also reflected in the perception of booking levels recovery. So it is anticipated that bookings will return to around 60% of pre-COVID-19 levels in 2022, and then gradually increase up to 90% in 2023. Now for the providers and agency market, there actually has been quite a few closures on the side of providers. Out of recent research BONARD did, we know that there was 159 English language centers in 2020 that were closed. And that was actually the highest number measured since BONARD is measuring global supply since 2015. There has been additional 73 centers have closed in 2021 up until September. We anticipate that there is going to be a few more centers closing, especially due to the fact that the government is no longer providing support, and at the same time, school still hasn't had enough time to rebuild their students' pipeline. On agency side, we saw that the market itself, agency market, is still there. And however, the consolidation was more on employee size. So agencies before had, let's say, 10 employees, now have 1 or 2. At the same time, approximately 20% of education agencies are active and actively operating, and the rest still remains in hibernation. Inevitably, around 15% of education agencies actually branched out to other sectors, which were more resilient in the pandemic, such as K-12 or higher education sector. On the road to recovery, there is also capacity to be rebuilt, and this capacity is on 2 layers. First one is HR. In the pandemic, we really saw the companies were downsizing, even on the level of senior levels. But the trend has changed. Or junior driven, the capacity that needs to be rebuilt is also in terms of host families. With the pandemic, people haven't traveled as much as they did before, and they might actually have a lot more disposable income at hand. And more importantly, since work shifted online, many of the spare bedrooms actually has been transitioned and changed to home offices. So there is a need to rebuild the host family capacity as well. To finish, some insights on the recovery from the side of programs and product and delivery platforms. Destinations are more increasingly looking in bringing destination closer to the source market, trying either transnational partnerships or actually in-country provisions, meaning delivering classes, summer camps right in the market. So for example, in Italy or in China. At the same time, there's going to be a need of marketing and communication of both providers and agencies to retain students' interest in studying abroad. Domestically. Last but not least, COVID-19 also brought the development in online delivery, and it truly varied across the destinations, and not only through destinations, but throughout the time. So while in Q1 2020, we still had most of the classes delivered face-to-face, then classes shifted in Q2 and Q3 more online, and then shifting slightly back to hybrid model in Q4. Where the product and online product will stand in the future, if it will remain, in what place and for what markets, that's something still to be defined and to be learned. And that's it from my side. I'm giving back to Patrik.
Thank you, Ivana. I think that was an excellent background to what we are about to discuss, and that we provided you guys with a sneak peek of where we see the industry going, again, based on our market sentiment surveys, industry conversations, and so forth. There already has been a question if we connect individually with the schools. The answer is that we cooperate with all these 8 major destinations. We either directly administer their national reporting, or we work with associations and governments to get this data, which is then aggregated and reported on a global scale. So I hope that that answers your question, John. And without further ado, we are really honored that we are joined today by a distinct panel of Language Travel Association representatives, in fact, their leadership. And I would like to take a moment to welcome Jodie Gray, the Chief Executive of English UK. We will also have an opportunity to talk to Cheryl Delk-Le Good, the Executive Director at EnglishUSA. And last but not least, it is a great privilege to welcome Gonzalo Peralta, the Executive Director of Languages Canada. So thank you all very much for taking the time to be here with us today. We have a few questions to ignite this discussion, and I will be also monitoring the Q&A section for any interesting questions or food for thought. And I'll probably start with you, Jodie, as you've also been quite active in terms of conveying strategic messaging. And I'd like to ask you, what are the ongoing and planned activities that you as a destination or association are undertaking on planning to undertake to facilitate student mobility?
Thanks, Patrik. And just to say thank you to Ivana for that really insightful presentation, really interesting statistics. And thank you to BONARD for arranging this webinar, inviting us all along to share. So it's always good, I think, to be able to hear from other destinations and compare experiences. And that's been one of the silver linings out of the pandemic, that I think there has been more opportunity for us to share our experiences as otherwise competing destinations, and it's been a really useful experience that I'm sure will take forward into this new world post-pandemic. In terms of what we are working on at the moment, what we've got planned, Patrik, to answer your question, is one of the key areas that we identified that we needed to do from the UK was to really communicate clearly with the markets, with agents, international partners, and also students and their influencers, parents. We know that the optics for COVID-19 and the UK's experience have not been that great in some markets, and that especially as we've had border restrictions coming in and going out and things changing, that there has been a need for some really clear information so that the market can really understand what it is, what hurdles they need to cross in order to come to the UK, if there are any, and indeed, as those hurdles have been removed, that the UK is very much open for business. Students can quite easily travel here, and so that they can understand what to expect when they get here in terms of life being pretty open and almost back to normal. So in order to do that, we put together a campaign with the Department for International Trade and the British Council earlier this year called the English with Confidence campaign. And it really was an opportunity, it was our attempt for the voices involved in the promotion of the UK's English language teaching sector to come together under one shared campaign with one set of messaging. And we're using the UK's Great brand, which is a national campaign to promote the UK. And that is the kind of umbrella branding under which DIT, the British Council and English UK are all working together. And we're really pleased with how that is going. We have a platform, a website, where there is information about COVID-19, about visas, and generally about the UK's ELT sector there. It is targeted mainly at agents because the majority of students who come to study English in the UK, as you know very well from the statistics, come via agencies. And we know that they are absolutely critical in terms of influencing decisions and passing on information and at this time reassuring their students. But that English with Confidence campaign is really just getting going, and we anticipate that it will be important as we roll it forward. We are intending to continue running it right through next summer into the autumn when we'll reevaluate. But the whole point of it is it's agile, responding to changes in the market. So when over the last few months countries have come off red lists or had their vaccine programs approved, we've been able to respond with messaging focused on that particular market. And we're working with Department for International Trade and the British Council and their overseas networks and with our own members to amplify the messages, to get those really clear, reassuring messages out there and as loudly as possible.
Thank you, Jodie. Seems like a lot of activity, and I think it's pleasing to see the involvement of the government bodies. Cheryl, if you don't mind me asking, could you give us a little bit of a sneak peek of what's going on your end?
Sure. And as Jodie did, I want to thank also BONARD for bringing us together here today. And as Jodie also mentioned, it's, you know, the blessing and curse of COVID is the blessing is that we've had so many opportunities actually to chat with each other, our peers overseas. So this is Happy International Education Week in the US. This is the week that had been designated for years. I'm not sure how long it's been going on, but this is that week. So we did have some information come out yesterday that I'll talk about in a little bit, but EnglishUSA has been supporting accredited post-secondary intensive English language and pathway programs for about 36 years. I know that there is talk and will be discussion around juniors, which our organization doesn't address specifically, but so many of our members do. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But EnglishUSA has three kind of areas of focus coming into this recovery period. And one is solidifying our position as the voice of English language programs in the US. So we're increasing many advocacy efforts, and I'll share those similar to as Jodie did for the UK. And we're also expanding our influence at home and abroad through some additional alliances and affiliations that are new to us this year. And as we always have, we support our member programs in sharing best practices, entrepreneurship, and innovation ideas. So fortunately, we feel that our government has been much more proactive in the Biden administration, and EnglishUSA has been a leader convener in bringing associations together to react to the proactiveness, I guess I should say. So the joint statement, there was a joint statement of principles that came out at the end of July from two government departments, the Department of State and the Department of Education. And in conversations I had last week, the Department of Commerce was also very much involved in that. This statement of principles put forward renewed commitment to promoting international education in the US, bringing the agencies together to make sure that different aspects of international education and English language programs are supported. And there's evidence of that, which is great. So just last week, November 8th, the travel ban was lifted from several countries, and there was a lot of clarification on the entrance for vaccinated visitors. And with a little bit of a further push, there was a push to ensure that non-immigrant visa holders, F1 students and scholars, et cetera, traveling from countries with a lower rate, 10% or less rate of vaccination, could still enter the country with a commitment to receive the vaccination. So we rely on our member programs to share that information with their agent partners, sponsoring agencies, et cetera, overseas. But any opportunity we can get, we also share those updates with our strategic affiliates. Other evidence of this support is the visa, the in-person interview was waived for many visa applications through the end of this year, so December 31st. Additional evidence, CVIP, which is the Student Exchange Visitor Program, they formally adopted the use of electronic signatures for the Form I-20 needed to get the visa. So that was also very welcome news to our members. And then again, when they're working with their partners and students coming into the country, they're small steps, but they're movements that help ease that process of applying and coming to the US. But we do want to make sure, this is where I just want to mention, we, the English language program industry in the US, do not want to get lost in the larger arena of international education. The Open Doors data came out yesterday, 2021, and non-degree students are included in that data. But these are the institutions of higher education. It does not include our English language private and multi-site programs. We have our own survey that with the data released in May. So we don't want to get lost in there. So EnglishUSA, along with 3 other associations, some of those larger ones that's mutual support. We wrote our own statement with a particular plea, call to action by Department of State Council Affairs to make sure that the student applicants for English language study in the US, no matter what type of program, they're all accredited. So they've been certified, accredited, to allow those students to not show bias toward a student who may be wanting to come to the US to study, low-level English, or they may choose to go to study. They don't want to study English in their country. They want to come for the study abroad experience. So we just want to make sure that the Department of State treats English language study as a bona fide reason for coming to the US to visit and learn. So I think I'll stop there so I don't talk so much, Patrik.
Parents and agencies, and that kind of recognition could really be a strong message to the industry. Gonzalo, I assume the same question applies to you. We've seen Canada grew in our agency surveys since the beginning of the pandemic. Could you please describe what are your most recent activities and how you perceive the road to recovery?
Thanks, Patrik. It's great to be here, everybody. Cheryl, Jodie, great to share this with you. And thank you to the BONARD team for putting everything together. Yeah, it's first, like, there's a question that I sort of hold in all of this. We use the term recovery. Is it actually a recovery? It seems to me more that this is a recreation of our sector. There are too many of the underpinning structures that have been changed forever. And so to recover, yes, I understand financial recovery, so to get back to those levels or those levels of students and so on. But there's I think a huge factor in Canada is there's a bit of a recreation going on. The Languages Canada board met recently to review our strategy, which we had launched right before the pandemic. It was one of the last events that we all went to together at the end of February of 2020. And our 5-year strategy was fully endorsed by our members. We just met to revisit, and it's pretty clear that strategy is really sound. We had to throw the plan for the year out the window, but the strategy is sound, and in it, innovation and looking forward, looking at intellectual property and quality and so on remain essential. So I think that really served Languages Canada and our sector well. We had the great fortune of having a government that is progressive, that for what governments are, seems to make some common sense decisions, and most important, they were listening, and we were there. So this road back to 2023, as it were, for us, one of the primary areas of activity is really with our own government. When we had the door open to international students on October 20th of last year, that was our government that allowed that. They agreed to that because we pushed and we pushed and we pushed and we pushed. But it's what's different now, and this is our complete awareness of this, is that health authorities have a say in everything. You speak with the Minister of Immigration, and he says, yes, and let me consult with the Minister of Health. You speak to Border Services, yes, and let me consult with the Minister of Health. You ask for a grant to support a trade mission. Oh, we don't grant, funds for outbound missions. Let's consult with the Minister of Health. So I think our playing field has changed forever. And that's one of the things that we're doing in Languages Canada, is adapting to our internal playing field. In the process of welcoming a student, there are so many more points of potential disturbance. It's not just getting a visa anymore. It's not just getting a plane ticket or even finding a homestay anymore. It's about getting your vaccines. It's about proving that you have the vaccines. It's about all the visa officers understanding that proof. Once landed, it's about getting the right decision by the port of entry officer. Once you're here, the school has rules about how many people can be in the room or not. And these keep on shifting and changing all the time. So there is no more disruption, because disruption is the norm. And I think we all live this on a day-to-day basis. Disruption is the norm. And if disruption is the norm, I think that's one of the things that we really want to communicate to students is, please don't worry, this is the norm. We will do everything possible to help you along the way. This is what we communicate to our members. This is what our members communicate to their valued partners overseas. And this is what agencies should be communicating to students. The doors are open and we're welcoming you in a way that is safe for both you and for Canadians. Beyond that, we're so excited. We have our annual conference. We're going to get to see each other face to face next year at the end of March, early April. There's going to be the whole dance, like, do we hug? Do we not hug? Do we shake hands? Do we not shake hands? But we're all excited to be with each other. And even before that, we have a trade mission, because we're in a situation where it's hard for us to go to some places. And that's, and when I mean hard, it's difficult because of travel restrictions, but it's also hard for us not to go, not to be with our partners overseas. So we turned it around and we're bringing our partners from overseas to Canada, right? And we have our first significant inbound trade mission happening at beautiful Lake Louise and Banff, and then going on to Vancouver. We're bringing 30 or so of the top Brazilian agencies and the decision makers from those agencies to visit us. And you know, I think that's part of what the future is. If you can't do it one way, then do it the other way. And by the way, there's no one better than language educators in order to be really flexible. So we're bringing the world to Canada. That's part of our strategy. We're keeping people informed. You know, we have, like all of us, I think, multi-jurisdictional impact. You know, what one school is able to do in one city, another one cannot do in another city. So how do we work around all of that? It's just we share information, and then we take that information and we go and we make the changes that are needed. If something is working really well in Nova Scotia, we tell the government of Manitoba, by the way, this policy seems to be really helping there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But our job is to make sure that it gets in front of people. So I would say for us, our doors are open, our hearts are open, our arms are open. We want to welcome students. We understand that there are a lot of hurdles. That's just the way it is. It's our new norm. You know? I'm going to stop there. Send it back to you, Patrik.
That you've decided to apply, and probably let me use that as a segue. And considering your ongoing conversations and consultation with the government, what can providers and agencies expect in the coming 6 to 12 months? Jodie, if you'd like to start.
I mean, that's the big question, isn't it, Patrik? What can we expect? And I think we've come to learn that we don't know what we can expect, and that it's uncertainty is the name of the game. And I think a lot of what Gonzalo said rang so true. In fact, one of the highlights for me of the pandemic has been having some always late at night, actually, so that we can include Australia, meetings and updates with Gonzalo and with Brett Blacker in Australia. And it's Gonzalo's wise words have been a highlight for me of the last 18 months. So thank you for those. I think it's and what we're hoping is going to happen is that we have more of the same, we keep moving in the same direction, and that the way that the borders have been lifted, the way that vaccines have been approved here in the UK, we've just had more vaccines been added to the list of approved vaccines by the government, that is going to keep happening. And we're not going to take a step backwards, and we really hope that is the case. I think that what we're seeing, though, as we move forward is that and as Gonzalo has pointed out, it isn't a going back to how it was before, because what we're seeing are new challenges facing the industry now as we step forward into this next phase, where students are starting to travel, which is brilliant. We're welcoming more of them here into classrooms in the UK and in other ELT destinations around the world. You know, really great. But at the same time, that there are now new challenges that the industry is having to face. You know, we've all lost a lot of staff, unfortunately, and we have businesses dealing with that as we go forward, and it's how we're going to have to keep adapting to what gets thrown up. In the UK as well, we've had changes in the immigration system, which you know, which are not preventing students from travelling, but they are things that we in the sector and the wider market have to adapt to and get used to, and that hasn't happened because there hasn't been a high volume of students travelling. So there are these things, these new challenges that are going to keep coming up with of course the ongoing uncertainty of COVID. But I think what's been remarkable is the resilience of the sector and their adaptability and the agility and just flexing to what comes next. And if someone had told me just 2 months ago in the UK, we'd be in a situation now where we have, you know, very very open borders and the traffic light system had virtually disappeared, I would have been shocked that we'd have been here by this point. So trying to predict what's coming in the next few months is probably a fool's game. But what we do know is that we are more agile and adaptable than we've been before. And that is something, that's another great learning from the pandemic. And when Gonzalo mentioned earlier about, is it recovery? What is recovery? And I heard something recently about, I think it was sort of using the metaphor of house building. You're looking at like a restoration where you're trying to like rebuild what you had before and exactly the way it was before, and all of that tradition, history, and exactly as it was. Or is it renovation where you're like honoring what came before and using that as a strong starting point, but improving upon it and coming back better? And I think that is surely where we're headed. So I think a lot of what we're doing as a sector now, when we're talking to government and working with other partners and stakeholders, is both, of course, looking at what we can do now to help businesses survive, what is needed now in terms of the market, but also trying to look at something slightly longer term, and in terms of that renovation, like how do we build upon what we've got to build a stronger and better industry for the future.
Right, and I think Cheryl, you could relate to these analogies, as I've put in the comments section. I wonder, what is your take on what's ahead? Again, reflecting on the recent government announcements and initiatives, how do you predict the next 6 months for the US as an ELT destination?
Yes, it is exciting to have that, you know, the positive outlook there from our government, and to steal Gonzalo's colleague Rachel back in October at our event. She talked about our industry being the anti-fragility and preparedness to expect the unexpected. The unexpected has become that new normal too, right? You know, to know that we're not going to know, you know, exactly how fast, you know, this trickle is evident now. And the CEO of IIE yesterday said, you know, that there is the pent-up need. People deferred, but they still have that taste and that you know, that longing for, you know, to come back and study. So I think the trickle that we're seeing now in some ways is probably welcome given the staffing issues. So Jodie referenced this already, but the build, I won't sound like Biden, the build better back, build back better, but the renovation and the renovating the house with very few teachers and staff right now. I mean, that's really an issue. So, you know, advice that I have for the members and for the industry is to be the mentors for those incoming, you know, the younger leadership and the younger teachers that also lived through this pandemic, but you know, look at ways that you can to, you know, use the skills that they used during this time to help with that renovation. The staffing issue is going to be a big one, but like I said, perhaps with the trickle now and applications and such are up for spring, as Jodie mentioned. The UK and US are similar in that acceptance of the WHO vaccines, and we do expect more students to come in the spring. The academic, professional, career focused, customized programs are likely ones that will appeal more for the English language learner adults. So, so while dealing with staffing, dealing with the customization and the renovation, it's just so important at this time to keep in communication, you know, with your partners. Don't compromise marketing or professional development, and you know, as you try to rebuild your staff. But we see the sun out there on the horizon. It's not going down, it's coming up.
And following up on that, Gonzalo, the same question for you. In your opinion, what is around the corner for Canada? I think you're muted.
God, I was really hoping not to do that in a public panel presentation, but there. So this is not an around the corner type of situation. This is a very long, slow curve. 2023 is not unrealistic as a year in which we can see back to, at least financially and economically, the levels that we were looking at. It's not unrealistic. I think it may be unrealistic to expect 2022 to be 100% of what 2019 was, but who knows? What we do know is numbers are up. For Canada, numbers are up, and it's we're very grateful for that. So we have registrations coming in now. We have more coming in for January. There seem to be a lot of questions, as I mentioned before, about the route that students can take in, but all of those are being resolved as we go along. So that's where I see us heading. As far as the back end of things, what about ourselves? What about our members? Are we ready? Totally agreed. Human resources is going to be a huge challenge. And this is, by the way, this is not just our sector, right? I mean, look at tourism. We were speaking with a partner in tourism, and we're not talking about front-facing staff, like at a desk at a hotel. They're saying we need people at management level desperately. We need people with a different set of skills. Hats off to our members and to their teachers, like to switch from in-class delivery to online delivery to hybrid delivery to one-quarter hybrid delivery all the time. It's a new set of skills. So we need a retooled workforce as well. And we're competing. Inflation is going up. This is not going to be an easy road. And somebody put in I think it was in the presentation, homestays. What does it mean for the future? What are we actually looking at over here? So I think we actually need to be a little bit grateful that things don't switch from one day to the next back to quote unquote what we called normal in 2019, because we wouldn't be able to handle it. And I am sure that agencies are feeling exactly the same thing. You just can't handle a student request the same way. Like the hoops that an agency has to run through now to get a student to the UK, to the US, to Canada, it's not like before, right? So resources are strained there as well. So this getting back to a healthier level is going to be a lot of relearning, retooling, and and so maybe we should be a little bit grateful that the recovery is not immediate. I think that's really, really important. And the other thing that we know is going to be needed is collaboration. Like this thing that's happening right now, I think is very important to hear from BONARD, to hear from Jodie, to hear from Cheryl, myself, to share this information is really important. I know that there are a million webinars out there. Just choose the right ones because the quality of the information is important. And I would say that the conversations that I've had with my counterparts, with Jodie and with others, are really key because they shed a light onto what's happening on the outside as well. So those conversations are going to be key for the future.
I think that's a great analysis of this sort of overarching impacts. And Gonzalo, I'd like to stay with you for a while, because you've already overlapping with my next question, which is about probably giving some piece of advice to providers and agencies. We have them here today with us, and as a token of our appreciation, we would also like to perhaps shed more light on what would be your top 3 recommendations for both providers and agencies. You mentioned retooling. You also mentioned being grateful about the pace of reconstruction, if I may say so. Is there anything else that comes to your mind how providers and agencies could navigate during this period?
This is a sector that this is about people. Like our sector's offer is an experience. So it's about people, and trust is paramount over here, right? The student needs to trust the agency and the school, the language program. They need to trust each other for things to work. And we have what's called inside organizations, there's a concept of first team. Who's the first team that you respond to? Government is our second team. They're out there. We need to build trust with each other, maintain lines of communication open and honest in order to deliver on what we promise. So my recommendation is make sure you build that. Make sure you work with the right people. Don't be lured by, yet another system that's going to somehow change your life and your world. Stay focused on people. Build those relationships. The people that we're inviting from Brazil, they're people we trust. And that's what we want to do at our event, is to build trust. So stay focused on people. Keep your eye on the ball. In the end, that's what the student wants, right? The student wants a personal experience. Otherwise, they could stay home and learn English or French online.
Excellent. Cheryl, what are your thoughts on that? Is there anything else you'd like to elaborate on?
Is it me, Patrik? Or?
Yes.
Yes, sorry, it glitched for a second. I agree 100% with what Gonzalo is saying about relationships. I'm so jealous of his event. I'm going to follow up with him on that. But I had the opportunity of being in 2 in-person events in the past couple of weeks, and I'll tell you, I feel like I will never take that for granted again. Being in person and having the exchange. But what comes with the in-person, which we're all not going to be able to be part of in the near future. But those relationships are so important between your partners. I say use the word partner more. At a event last week that we had, one of our webinar speakers referred to her, the people she was on a campus, the partners over in housing, the partners over in the accounting office. That word partner, I think, is trust building, as Gonzalo was mentioning. So important. And but I just want to add one more thing. For the educational providers, part of building this trust, you need to keep on top of the legislative and national and local issues related to international education. You need to be poised and ready to share that information with your partners. At our event in October, we were quite bluntly told by an agent down in South America that the information changes so quickly that you need to share, you need to update your partners on a regular basis. That means that you need to be aware and involved, and as a constituent for your government folks as well. The U.S. is trying with this potential national strategy, trying to come up with a brand campaign And when we get there, if we get there, and Jodie, we love yours. When we get there, you know, that may create some common ways for us to communicate with partners, but relationships and keeping up on the issues in order to maintain those relationships.
Yeah, it's interesting how this is also a mindset thing. And Jodie, to wrap up this round, what would be your take on those recommendations?
No, absolutely agree with everything that Gonzalo and Cheryl said about the importance of relationships and partnerships. And I would just add that I think what has come out of the last 18 months, 2 years, is that it's so important going forward now to try to be open-minded and not refer back to what was in the past in 2019, because in some ways we don't, it's a complete reset now, and that's why working with organizations like BONARD and gathering intelligence and looking at the intel and the data as we start to see emerging trends is going to be so important. I think there was a quote that we shared with our members at our members conference, which is a hybrid event, our first hybrid event earlier this year. And it's actually, I think it's a quote from the Pope, I think, but don't quote me on that. And he said that the one thing that we know for sure during the pandemic is that we're all making it up as we go along. And I don't think that's actually something to be scared about. I think that's quite exciting. There's an opportunity there. And as an example of how we have sort of tried to live by that, in 2020, for the first time, we ran a project that we call the Prelim Project. And for years, we have been talking with various stakeholders about how we open up access to development money in developing markets and teacher training in developing markets, and break up the big pot of development money into smaller bits and put together like a consortium bid involving lots of our members and to work on capacity building. And it was always just a pipe dream, but the pandemic gave us the opportunity to do it because there wasn't a lot of other business going on. It wasn't about making money for the people involved, although they did receive a grant. It was about learnings, working together, seeing, and just really piloting something new. It was a huge success. 3,000 teachers were involved in developing countries that were not traditional ELT markets. We've just launched Prelim 2 in 40 markets. The list of countries makes me smile whenever I look at it because it's just non-typical ELT markets. We've got 40 language centres in the UK involved, all learning together, all collaborating. This was something that we wouldn't have ever thought was possible before the pandemic, and now it's happening for the second time. And I just think that like open-mindedness, if we can all take that forward, not just in the UK, but as a global industry, we've got something exciting.
Brilliant. I know that we are inching closer towards the end of our session, but I do have one final question for everybody. And it's also going back to one of the questions posted in the Q&A section. I'd be interested in hearing what is your estimate about the 2022 booking levels. So if you can do a quick round of what's your expectation of where the industry could possibly get in 2022. Jodie, if you don't mind starting.
I think the question was asking whether we felt BONARD's numbers were fair. Yes, that's what we're basing our kind of best guesses on in terms of our own planning. Around 60% recovery in 2022, and then hopefully inching up towards pre-pandemic levels in 23. Perfect.
Cheryl, your take on that?
I would agree if I had to read the crystal ball, but definitely from the trickle of a stream to a small moving gush, you know, maybe to a regular flowing river in 23.
Sounds great. And Gonzalo, if you could wrap up the round.
I think we'll beat BONARD's numbers. I think we'll, you know, it's not going to be 150%. It's not even going to be 100% of 2019 numbers. But I think that we can probably go above 60, maybe 70%. Let's see. Everything hinges on a couple of key points in the next months, and then we see where we go. What we are interested in is also just tying language into immigration, to education, tourism, and so on. And this adds a lot to our offer. So if that happens, then there's something of substance that we'll be able to offer.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Thanks, everybody. I mean, this is the moment where I'd like to thank everyone for joining the session, and a big thank you to our panelists for sharing their insights and perspective. I think we've been able to learn a lot about the positivity, but also the practicality. And I appreciate you sharing, again, your comments and probably sharing some of the sneak peeks from your conversations with the governments, with partners, as well as with your members, as your sort of overarching views are really critical. For the audience, the recording will be available in case you would like to rewatch any of the parts of today's broadcast. And again, thanks very much, and until next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
Patrick.
I like the fighting talk. Yeah, Gonzalo. Same time next year.
Absolutely.
Nice seeing you all again.